Hello, I'm Mabel Chan, and this is One in a Billion. Today, we have part 3 of our special series, LifeChangers, Time to Tell. In this series, we focus on Asian philanthropists who have built a lifetime of success on the backbone of adversity or on the shoulders of visionary.
He lived in the 20th century. He had utmost loyalty to his family and country, being a visionary.
That is the voice of Carolyn Hsu-Balcer, a philanthropist, business entrepreneur, and art collector in New York. She was talking about her great-granduncle Guo Bingwen, the first Chinese to have earned a PhD in America.
He understood that in order to stand shoulder to shoulder on the same global platform as the Western powers, it was very important for China at that time to modernize its educational system.
And her great-granduncle's aspiration has inspired Carolyn's own philanthropic passion.
My main goal is to help young Chinese people develop their intellect and have a goal-oriented vision. I think this is very important to be both Chinese and global in thinking.
In today's episode, Carolyn talks about her early childhood and upbringing, including a personal wish for the next generation of Chinese in America. Here's our conversation. I do want to start with something that I read about you. When you were 3 years old, you said you were a very naughty girl because while you were mesmerized by the Chinese scrolls and the eggshells that your grandfather had painted, you thought you could make them better by drawing on them with crayon. And you also loved those eggshells with the delicate brush paint so much, you touched but cracked both of them. Now, you said that was stuck in your memory. So here's my question. Who found out about what you did and what happened to you?
Well, my mother found out, of course, and I was punished. I'm sure I was spanked, but I think back now, I just always thought I could make them better. And the eggshells, I wanted to know what it felt like. I realized the whole idea of liking to improve or make things better has stuck with me my whole life.
That's one of the things that I found is sort of similar in our childhood. Maybe around 3 years old for me, I remember I was sitting in my classroom after school waiting for my mom to pick me up. I was so bored. I saw a pair of scissors and I was looking at my skirt, which is basically the school uniform. I started cutting it up to try to make pleats out of it and started dancing around in the pleated cut up skirt. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that's very interesting. You're very creative.
I was wondering how you came to know that you were a naughty girl.
Only much later did I realize I destroyed something very precious. But being 3 years old, I just knew I did something mommy didn't like.
Now, I'm going to just jump in now with a little more serious question. Carolyn, I first came across you as a philanthropist in the Financial Times article. And it's clear to me then that your philanthropic passion for education, art, and culture has been heavily influenced by your great-granduncle, Guo Bingwen, and you'd call him a great role model. How would you begin to describe the kind of person he was and what he'd aspired to achieve in life?
He was a very well-rounded person. He lived in the 20th century, but was really a traditional Confucian. And by that, I mean he had utmost loyalty to his family and country. Being a visionary, he understood that in order to stand shoulder to shoulder on the same global platform as the Western powers, it was very important for China at that time to modernize its educational system. And by doing so, it meant combining our traditional Chinese classical studies with practical disciplines from the West, such as economics and science. So he was someone who didn't forget who he was, but then was ready to embrace the new world as well.
When you mentioned his time, when was that period?
So he was 26 years old, already a mature young man in 1908 when he came to America, to Worcester. There he wanted to study law. He had already been working in the customs department in Shanghai for some time and in trade. Once he came to Worcester College, he realized to be really effective and to build a country, you needed education. So he changed, and then he began to study education, and then ultimately ended up at Columbia Teachers College and studied under Paul Monroe.
Paul Monroe was an American educator from Indiana who traveled to China dozens of times in the 1920s and 30s. Monroe believed that creativity and development of self-confidence should be major educational goals, and his philosophy had deeply influenced many Chinese students under him, including Carolyn's great-granduncle, Guo Bingwen.
He was the first Chinese to get a PhD in education, comparative education. 1914.
Wow. So it sounds to me that what he had aspired to achieve in his life, his personal ambition, if you will, was tied to the national goals.
Yes.
And in what ways does that resonate with you?
Well, for me, being Chinese and being born in another country, raised outside of China, I always want to help other Chinese. This is something that my parents instilled in me. And I want to, be able to help my country as well. So that's really a focal point of everything.
Wow. Well, you said something that really piqued my interest. You mentioned my country, and yet, if I understand correctly, you were born in America. And you wouldn't call America your country?
It's my host country, and it's a wonderful host country, an adopted country. I think we have to understand there are many ways that people came to America. A lot came to seek fame and fortune, and others came really not by their own choice. They would not have thought to have left their country if circumstances hadn't been the way they were.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when one comes to seek fame and fortune, you say, I think it's maybe more appropriate to say, well, this will be your new country. You've willingly left your own country.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very personal matter, so I'm only sharing my viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Everyone has their viewpoint, which I totally respect. Everyone's upbringing is different. I was really raised in a traditional pre-1949 Shanghai-centric household. Despite being born in the US and then growing up in Thailand and then later the Philippines.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that about you. How long were you living outside of the United States while growing up?
I was 4 years old when we moved to Thailand, and I lived there until I was 16, and then we moved to the Philippines. So I finished high school there, and then I came to America for college.
I see. So now it helps me understand you a lot more in terms of your life journey and how you view yourself and how you view your home country.
From the time I was born until 4 years old, my parents would regularly drive from Richmond, Virginia, where we lived, to Washington, D.C., probably every 6 weeks to meet Uncle Ko Bing-wan and a lot of the other relatives. So I remember these trips the way a 4-year-old would remember. Most as he had a desk and it was full of wind-up toys. Then in 1969, the summer he passed away, I remember I sat in the lobby of the hospital where my mom ran upstairs to see him. I was very young, 5, 6, 7. Mom always spoke about her family. various forebearers who had worked for the country, contributed to the country, their education. She spoke a lot about Guo Bingwen's achievements. So this was something I heard pretty much my whole life growing up. Mother was very proud of her family. It was a early Christian family, Christian since 1800. So what this meant was that the women were all educated. My grandmother's generation all were university graduates, St. John's, Jingling College, etc. She was very proud of that. At that time in China, it was modernizing, but you still had very traditional families. My father's family is a traditional Confucian business family. So basically, I grew up with the 10 Commandments on one hand and Confucius values on the other.
Why do you feel compelled to continue in his footsteps of building bridges between East and West?
My original intent was simply to promote my forebears' legacy in China, and great-grand uncle Guo Bingwen being one of them. And I wanted to promote New York City.
In 2014, Carolyn spearheaded an international symposium to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Guo Bingwen as the first Chinese to receive a PhD in education from Columbia University Teachers College.
22 professors from the mainland and 5 professors from Taiwan attended, along with China's former Minister of Education, Madame Wei Yu. So this symposium inspired educational academics in the mainland to begin studying him. And the 2 universities that he founded, one was Southeast Nanjing University, considered China's first co-ed modern university, 1915, and Shanghai Finance and Economics University, founded in 1919. They both began major endeavors to honor him as their founder. And as a result, I became really involved with these universities, giving scholarships, mentoring students. And this led to more opportunities, and it sort of snowballed.
Right. It's really grand. It's something so big that I can see why. What makes it compelling for you is that you want to continue that kind of grand work, right?
My main goal is to help young Chinese people develop their intellect and have a goal-oriented vision. I think this is very important to be both Chinese and global in thinking. I find so many young people forget who they are. They think globalness, being cosmopolitan, they for some reason associate it with being American or Western. And that's what they want to be. But no, one wants to be who you are inside. That should not change. But yet you want to have a cosmopolitan view of the world.
Somebody like yourself, because of your upbringing and your personal and family history, you feel compelled to bring the full range of your being, right, into play.
I think that would be a fair way to put it.
Well, let me ask you, what kind of impact do you hope to make through your philanthropy? And how do you measure impact?
I thought about this question for quite a bit. And in terms of measuring impact, I just don't think about it. I just want to make a positive difference in the lives of others. It's for them to let me know that I've impacted their lives. It's enough for me to know that I've had a positive influence in a young person's development.
What are some of the cross-cultural communication or educational projects that you've created that you're most proud of?
But mentoring young students is what I enjoy most. And what I feel I want to just impart some of the knowledge I have. I had a very traditional Chinese upbringing that prized family education, and that is something lacking. Whether it's economics in the family, or it's the way that the society is now. I learned manners and poise in a variety of social circumstances. I was taught to be proud of my culture and country. And so many young Chinese people from both China and the US simply do not have this kind of upbringing for a variety of reasons. So I really try to share these values with them.
Well, sharing personal values with Chinese Americans is one thing, but Carolyn also goes out of her way to offer educational opportunities to children in remote regions of China.
I come upon a situation where there's a true need. For example, in Yunnan province on the Vietnam border, I provide scholarships to high school students of minority heritage because their parents do not see the value in keeping them there. They'd rather them work. And so in order to keep them in high school, we provide scholarship. The scholarship is really a stipend for them, which actually really goes to the parent. Yes, the money that they would be making by having a job so that they continue to finish high school.
Okay.
From there, hopefully they go on to university. That is one program where I feel like there's a true need. In an even more remote area, there's a middle school that's in the mountains there. I support the school. We built a library for them.
Wow.
And I send books every year, twice a year, all different kind of books. And then we also built showers. It's a boarding school. The government gives them free meals, free books. There was no shower facilities, so it's not very hygienic. So I managed to find a way using the solar panels, and we organized showers there.
How did the projects come to your attention?
A friend of mine in the Chinese Foreign Service was posted there. That was his hardship post. I said, I want to visit, a school, and can I bring supplies or whatever the children need? And so he did say, you can bring toiletries and supplies. So we packed up there about 300 children, and I organized these kits. I write letters to the students, or when I'm there, I do give talks to them. And the one thing I do emphasize to the students in both the middle school and the high school is that they actually have a double burden. Because on one hand, they need to be proud of their heritage and keep their customs and language alive. Because it's so easy when you're disenfranchised and you're a minority to be made to feel that your language and customs are backward, no need for them. But yet they have to learn Chinese. They have to learn the Han dialect and be proficient in reading and writing if they want to get a job.
What is the biggest challenge for you in this work? You can take this in any direction you want. Perhaps it's the biggest challenge for you that you want to get done right now in the area of cross-cultural understanding that you're still wrestling with.
The only challenge that I ever come up against when doing my projects in China is sometimes the government. You just have to be sensitive to what the restrictions are. When I was working with the schools in Yunnan, I had to be very careful how I phrase things and to be sensitive to the administration's constraints too.
I see.
There are many other projects that I do in China. I support an orphanage. It's a home for disabled children. Some children who were not disabled, but their parents were in jail because of drug issues.
I see.
They needed to be prepared to go to school, to enter society, because they would be too far behind if they were just left doing nothing every day until they became 5 years old or 6 years old. So I arranged for a teacher to come and to work with these children.
Right.
All of this requires working hand in hand with the municipal government and following sometimes their agenda and their rules.
You need to be so flexible and adaptive.
Yes.
So I wonder if you can share any particular challenge unique to what you're trying to do in that East-West cultural understanding platform.
What's important for me, and this is a very personal thing, is that I feel the Chinese children raised in America, a lot of them want to connect with their Chinese roots, but they don't even know how.
Yes.
Whether they were raised in a place where they were very few Chinese, or they had parents who wanted them to integrate, or maybe just couldn't be bothered to be on top of them to have Chinese lessons, to speak Chinese, and so forth. So I find really this is another mission of mine, is to really encourage young Chinese who've been raised here to reconnect them with their Chinese roots.
Now, I wanted to focus a bit more. Carolyn, tell me, what are some of the early formative experiences that have shaped your attitudes towards people from a different background, racially, ethnically, or socioeconomically?
I think my upbringing in Thailand was very cosmopolitan. You know, we grew up in a very traditional Chinese household. My parents spoke Shanghai dialect. Our help at home was Cantonese, so we learned Cantonese, even though I'm not terribly good. And we had Chinese lessons for reading and writing, but I attended an international school, predominantly American. Our church was Anglican and, very British.
Wow.
So it made me really comfortable and knowledgeable about people from different cultures and backgrounds. To be honest with you, I wasn't that keen to come to America for college.
Oh, really? Why not?
I was just very happy living in Asia. And actually, I was thinking about going to University of the Philippines.
Tell me more about that. I'm curious. I'm very curious. So why did you come and what was the argument for it?
My mother said in order to have a future, I would have to come here. You also have to remember, we only have an American citizenship. Like people who left Shanghai in 1949, if you came to America, that's what you had. We can't go back to China. We don't have a home anymore.
Right.
My parents had moved and lived in different countries in Southeast Asia, only meant that I could live under their visa, being under 21. After 21, I would have to get my own visa or, find my own way.
Now, am I right that you were born in Richmond, Virginia?
Yes.
So what brought you to live in all those countries in Asia?
My father's work, he is in tobacco business, and he worked with Universal Leaf Tobacco, which is America's largest leaf company. It's a company that my grandfather was doing business with from Shanghai since the 1920s.
Uh-huh.
When the family was leaving for Hong Kong, end of 48, they were starting to make preparations.
In the final months of 1948, Shanghai, where Carolyn's family lived, was in total chaos. China was deep in a civil war between the nationalist Kuomintang and the insurgent communists. Over 1 million people fled to Hong Kong and Taiwan as the People's Liberation Army took over city after city, culminating in a communist takeover of China in 1949.
And then my father was sent to Richmond to finish school, and his guardian was the chairman of the company.
You were not so keen about coming to America, and yet you came. How did you come to choose Wheaton College, and what was your experience like?
Well, I decided, since being one's wife, my great-grand-aunt Ruth's sister had gone there, I will go there. I really didn't have a clue.
Well, now I just want to turn to a project. Is the documentary project that you got involved in called Above the Drowning Sea, about Jewish refugees who were accepted by China to settle in Shanghai. It's so powerful. What drew you to that project?
Well, it's a story that I had grown up hearing. Growing up in Southeast Asia, often I'd be out with my parents. They'd be speaking Shanghainese. And then a European person or couple would approach them and start speaking Shanghainese to them.
Wow.
These were Jewish refugees or children of refugees who had spent World War II in Shanghai. So this is a subject I was very familiar with. And both my husband and I felt that there was no story, no documentary about it that told it from the Chinese point of view. The existing documentaries were always told from the European point of view with little consideration that the people who gave the refugees a place to stay were even worse off than they were. The Chinese were living it was a poor neighborhood, Hongkou, in dire conditions, because it was also a place where Chinese refugees from other places were pouring in.
Right.
And this was in the midst of the Japanese invasion. Yet these poor Chinese were willing to welcome these refugees and share what little they had with them. So we really felt that this side of the story needed to be told.
Wow. Listening to you, a Chinese phrase comes to mind. And I'm going to have to say that in Cantonese, and I'm going to see if you understand what I'm saying. 同舟共濟.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It is a phrase that I grew up with in Hong Kong. And that is, we're in the same boat. So we have to help save one another, right? So we're in the same boat. Was that the key message in that film?
Well, the key message of the film is that one time or another in the distant past, everyone's family were refugees of one sort or another. And it's only through the kindness of strangers that we have survived and thrived. And I think this is a lesson that we need to remember as we witness the never-ending flow of refugees from the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Eastern Europe.
Yes. How does this ongoing refugee crisis, from all these places that you just mentioned, steer you in a different direction of philanthropy?
Well, I definitely am very willing and happy to help. This is more the bandage, when the refugees are already leaving and being relocated to somewhere. Our philanthropy is the check.
Right.
But I think what really needs to be done, and something our film can do, is to really send the message is that you don't want to create the situation for refugees.
I wonder how you evaluate what has been most rewarding in how you have given time or money or your talent.
It's been a lot of projects that I've been involved with, have been 20 some years already. When I see a generation of young people coming up and doing well, and that they're able to make a difference to the society, that's what's, for me, the most rewarding.
Have you thought about the values or beliefs that you want to pass on to the next generation through the philanthropic work that you do?
I hope that everyone has the value of love for country, to want to give back to society, to be proud of themselves. If you're proud of yourself and you have self-respect, then you can be a truly productive person.
Thank you, Carolyn Hsu-Balcer. In our next episode,
I was crying. I didn't know what to do. I was suddenly without a program. I felt like I had failed, because to be actually cut and told that, oh, we don't want you in the program because you can become a plastic surgeon, was an emotional thing.
that is Dr. Robin Yuan, a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills, a philanthropist, and an author of 4 books. That is our next episode on the last Friday of November. One in a Billion LifeChangers special series is made possible by our corporate sponsor, Claudia Lin, founder and CEO of Legacy Maker LLC, an investment advisory company with a holistic approach to investing and managing your asset. One in a Billion is produced by our sound engineer and designer, Brian Latinowich, and our lovely theme song is composed by Brad McCarthy. Let us know if you want to join our team of volunteers, help us plan events, or pitch a story. Just go to our website, oneinaBillionVoices.org, and find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.